Hi, my name's Tiger Cravenelli. I'm a retired teacher in California. I'm gay. Spent my first 15 years in the closet and then came out. And now I'm retired. I want to read kid LGBT books, modeling them for what you can read in your classrooms. Then talk about some experiences, what it was like being a gay teacher in a classroom in California, and then remind teachers about some of the LGBT laws uh, from my perspective. All right, I'm going to read Heather Has Two Mommies. This is by Leslea Newman, illustrated by Laura Cornell. Very colorful and beautiful pictures. Heather lives in a little house with a big apple tree in the front yard and lots of tall grass in the backyard. Heather's favorite number is two. She has two arms, two legs, two eyes, two ears, two hands, and 2 feet. And I like her boots, like her cowgirl boots. I like the flower in her hair. If I were reading this to students, I would probably Google image cowgirl boots or cowgirl. Heather has two pets, a ginger-colored cat named Ginger Snap and a big black dog named Midnight, and I would Google Ginger Snap. Heather also has two mommies, Mama Jane and Mama Kate, and they're eating apples from their apple tree. Mama Kate is a doctor. She has two stethoscopes so she and Heather can listen to each other's heartbeats. Here's Midnight and Ginger Snap. Mama Jane is a carpenter. She has two hammers so she and Heather can build things together. Heather and her two mommies have lots of fun together. On sunny days, they go to the park. Better, better, hey, better, better. Look at Midnight in the picnic basket. Midnight. On rainy days, they stay inside and bake cookies. Heather likes to eat two ginger snaps and drink a big glass of milk. I think I'll just go ahead and show you. Yeah, if I were reading this to students, I'm going to guess not everyone has had a ginger snap, so I want to build their background knowledge. Maybe show them what a stethoscope is. Cowgirls, cowgirl boots. Nice racial diversity, that's always good. Basset hound. Midnight isn't a basset hound, but Midnight reminds me of a basset hound. One day, Mama Kate and Mama Jane tell Heather that they have a surprise for her. You're going to start school next week. Mama Kate says there'll be lots of other kids to play with, and a teacher named Miss Molly, adds Mama Jane. Can Midnight and Ginger Snap come too? Asks Heather. No, they have to stay home, Mama Jane says. But you can bring two special things with you, says Mama Kate. Heather chooses her favorite blue blanket to rest with at nap time and her favorite red cup to drink out of at snack time. Soon the big day arrives, and Mama Kate and Mama Jane take Heather to her new school. Wow, look at that. Looks like so much fun. There are the 7 continents. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If I were reading that, I would probably review those with my kids. There are so many things to play with. Heather sees building blocks, dress-up clothes, crayons, and paint. Heather also sees a big round table for snack time and a quiet, cozy corner for nap time. While Mama Jane and Mama Kate talk to Miss Molly, Heather puts 2 puzzles together, all by herself. Soon it's time for Mama Jane and Mama Kate to leave. They kiss Heather goodbye, and Heather cries, but only a little, and it's okay to have emotions. It's okay to have sad feelings every once in a while. There's Heather with her pink tutu, or like tutu. Heather has lots of fun at her new school. She builds a tower out of building blocks and dresses up like a firefighter. Woohoo! She's having fun. She drinks apple juice out of her favorite red cup at snack time and rests in the quiet corner with her favorite blue blanket at nap time. Am I saying nap and snack? Am I getting those Excuse me if I'm getting those mixed up. After nap time, all the children sit in a circle while Miss Molly reads them a story about a boy whose father is a veterinarian. Who knows what a veterinarian is? Asked Miss Molly. I do. My mommy is a veterinarian, Juan says. A veterinarian is an animal doctor. My daddy is a people doctor, shouts David. My mommy is a people doctor too, Heather shouts even louder. What does your daddy do? David asks Heather. I don't have a daddy, Heather says. She looks around the circle and wonders, am I the only one here who doesn't have a daddy? I have an idea, Miss Molly says. Let's all draw pictures of our families. What a good idea. Good teacher. Juan draws his mommy, daddy, and big brother Carlos. Miriam draws her mommy and her sister Rachel playing in the park. Stacy draws her daddy and her papa reading her stories. Daddy, papa, dad, his dad, or another LGBT couple, maybe. Joshua hangs up the picture he drew of his mommy and stepfather dropping him off at his daddy's house. Of course, you have families that have multi-families, blended families. Emily tapes up the picture she drew of her grandma and their two puppies, Emmett and Charlie. David straightens out the picture he drew of the day his mommy and daddy brought his new sister Veronica home. Probably have lots of bigger brothers and sisters in their class. Miss Molly looks at all the pictures. It doesn't matter how many mommies or how many daddies your family has, Miss Molly says. It doesn't matter if your family has sisters or brothers or cousins or grandmas or grandpas or uncles or aunts. Each family is special. The most important thing about a family is that all the people in it love each other. Which is true. Soon Heather's first day of school is over. When Mama Kate and Mama Jane arrive to pick her up, Heather shows them all the pictures. Is that me? Mama Kate asks, pointing to Heather's picture. Is that me? Mama Jane asks, pointing to. This is the mommy I love the best, Heather says, pointing to her picture. And this is the mommy I love the best, Heather says, pointing again. Mama Kate and Mama Jane both laugh as Heather gives each of them 2 kisses. Then she takes their hands and they all head home. And that's the end of the story. What a wonderful, wonderful story. So one story I want to talk about, short one, I've mentioned this before, is when I was teaching at an elementary school, teaching 6th grade, a 3rd grade teacher came to me, a very close friend of mine. She said, hey, Mr. C, one of my students has 2 moms, and the other students were teasing her. And I went out and asked the librarian. We had a great librarian then, a very helpful woman, very knowledgeable of LGBT books. Said the librarian helped me find some books, and I brought them in. And I think the students are teasing her less, are showing her more respect, which is good. Now, there's another story I wanted to tell, but I wanted to do a little review of some laws and guidelines before I do that. Excuse me. So this is from the Department of Education in California. It's frequently asked questions about Senate Bill 48. Senate Bill 48 added LGBT and disabled and I think South Pacific Islander people to the already list of marginalized peoples that have to be represented in the classroom, especially social science, social studies, because traditionally many of these groups have been censored out. So not only do you add them, but now the law also prohibits any kind of sponsored activity that reflects adversely on these groups. So I think that's really important because at my school, the administration was very reluctant to add LGBT people. I remember talking about Harvey Milk, and I've mentioned this before. We were comparing and contrasting Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, the written version that I display up front, with the YouTube audio and visual version, and talk about, figures of speech and how each one has the tones of each one. But we would, that would lead to a discussion on martyrs, because Martin Luther King was a martyr, and the students would say, what is a martyr? And I would talk about John F. Kennedy, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and then I would mention Harvey Milk. So I got an email from the administrator because the parent complained, saying, just a reminder, Harvey Milk is not in the 6th grade standards. So that is discrimination, because there are so many people we talk about, in our classrooms when we teach social studies. We pull in other names, like our English language arts. We would always compare and contrast Sandra Day O'Connor's biographies from different authors, and she's not listed as a 6th grade, person in 6th grade standards, but we wouldn't censor her out. So that was discrimination. Martin Luther King, he's traditionally not listed as someone we wait until 6th grade to talk about. Or if my students, for example, if we were talking about continents, I say, how many continents are there? And they would say, oh, there are 2 or 3. Well, guess what? Continents is not listed in the 6th grade standards. But I wouldn't censor it out because it's not part of the standards. I would say this is, I want to address this need in my classroom. So anyway, censoring LGBT people out, that is prohibited. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to sponsor activities like censorship that looks adversely upon these groups, including LGBT. And if you're censoring, you're breaking the law. You're violating Senate Bill 48. And I don't think that's my opinion. I think that's the law. You better read the law. It's right there. When did it take effect? 2012. These laws have been around for a long time. This is what, like 13 years ago? My administration used to argue with me, say, well, we want to wait till textbooks come out. We started arguing around 2015, and textbooks weren't supposed to come out to 2017. I said, well, you know what? Right here, Department of Education says, I'll just read this. California content standards provide a description of what students are expected to know, but they're not intended to be restrictive or exhausted list of topics. That's what I was talking about earlier. The standards are the minimum. They're not the maximum. And in a document we're going to look at later in the framework says we add relevant examples of diversity to the standards. We add relevant examples and include sexual orientation as one of the cultural backgrounds that we add. That's not the maximum. We don't go to see if Harvey Milk is listed, and if he's not, we say that's it. No, those standards are the minimum, and we add relevant examples. This is what I was talking about earlier. Administrators said, we're waiting for textbooks. I said, right here. The district may adopt supplemental instructional materials at any time. I remember calling the Department of Education, having this discussion, and the Department of Education representative would tell me, says, your district is wrong. They're telling you need to wait. No, your district can add examples of diversity at any time. Now, if it's a large scale project, like, hey, we're going to add a sex ed curriculum in grades 4, 5, and 6, guess what? You need to have right here, you need to have social content review committees. But certainly if you want to add a name to like a discussion, like if I'm studying children's books, children authors, like we did in my 6th grade class, the children would write a book report on their favorite children's author. And I would always talk about Maurice Sendak, who's the author of Where the Wild Things Are. And I would mention he's gay, like your teacher, and he has had a partner who's passed away. I forget his name, but 50 years. They were together 50 years. He was a writer. He was a doctor. Anyway, I'm allowed to do that. I don't need to go through a content review committee to add a name, unless someone might argue with me, but you know what? Unless you need to go through a process or a chain of steps to name anyone. If I want to talk about Sandra Day O'Connor in my classroom, if I don't have to go through, get permission, which I don't, I don't need to get permission to talk about Martin Luther King or Malcolm X. So I should not have to get permission to mention Maurice Sendak or that he's from the gay minority group. If your school district's doing that, you're breaking the law, you're discriminating. You're having one set of standards, and you have to ask yourself why. Why are you doing that? Is your school district? Are you trying to create a religious school district? I had an administrator said you can't identify as LGBT. She didn't say it like that. She just said you didn't have to. You didn't have to identify as LGBT. My students said homo in the classroom as a put down. I said, excuse me, I'm gay, and I find that offensive. And the administrator said, you don't have to identify as LGBT. You can just say you find it offensive. I'm like, well, no, what? Unless you're going to tell everyone not to mention their cultural background, tell the Eskimo teacher, hey, you can't mention that you're Eskimo. That's discrimination. That's discrimination. If you don't believe me, call the California Office of Civil Rights. It used to be the Department of Fair Employment and Housing. Now it's the California Office of Civil Rights. They regulate the school districts. If you have a complaint, by the way, if you're gay and you're being harassed, call the California Office of Civil Rights, file a complaint, and they will vet it. They'll either say, hey, listen, Nancy, you better get a little more tough. They're just, this isn't discrimination. You're just being sensitive. Or they'll say, this is very serious. We're going to investigate. Or they might say, you know what? It's kind of borderline. So what we're going to do is we're going to issue a right to sue letter and let you, if you want to pursue this in a civil court, you can. That's what I did. They gave me a right to sue letter. I was being harassed by Modesto City Schools about being open in the classroom, about mentioning a few LGBT people, and other things. But I found the California Civil Rights Law Group. They said, well, do you have a right to sue letter? I said, yeah. They said, we'll represent you on contingency. It was about a 4-year process, a little delayed because of COVID, but they filed a legal complaint for me against the LEA. Then we went about a year later, we went into discovery. And then about a year later, we went into deposition. And then about a year later, we were about to go into trial, and their lawyers and our lawyers decided to settle out of court. By the way, I'm not supposed to talk about specifics about the amounts of money, but I know my lawyers' fees were around $400,000 up to that time. And I only had 2 lawyers, and they had like about 5 lawyers. So I'm just guessing that they had to shell out at least $500,000 for their legal fees. So if you're an LEA, I'm not radical. I'm just your normal guy. And what I was doing in my classroom, I was just mentioning, students would say, what did you do this weekend? I said, well, my husband and I went and did this. Or I mentioned Harvey Milk. If we were talking about martyrs, or I would talk about Sandra Day O'Connor, we would talk about judicial jurisdiction. And I would say, oh, yeah, in California, actually, we had gay marriage legalized before the Supreme Court said, but some states didn't have gay marriage. And then the Supreme Court in 2015 said, hey, that violates the Constitution. So the federal government had powers over the states, and they changed that's judicial jurisdiction. So, then I got in trouble for talking about gay marriage. I wasn't talking about gay marriage. I was talking about judicial review using gay marriage as an example. But anyway, my point is that we can talk about those things. If you're being harassed, stand up, you have rights. The California Office of Civil Rights, what they do is they use the FEHA, F-E-H-A, the Fair Employment Housing Act, as a guideline to determine, they'll take what you say and look at the laws and see if you're being discriminated against, but you have a protected class. I better get back on track here. So we're on the question and answer of the Department of Education regarding Senate Bill 48. Just one other thing, it says to be open and transparent with parents. You should be. I'm not saying hide anything from parents. I was telling my school district then, before I resigned and filed a lawsuit, I said, we are supposed to be transparent with parents. You guys should be putting out every year in your beginning of the year information that goes home. You should be putting out a statement saying, here at Modesto City Schools, we respect all cultural backgrounds, including LGBT, and we respect the guidelines in Senate Bill 48, and we highlight positive contributions. But they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't do it. In my opinion, they were trying to run the school district like a private school, which is not. It's public school. It's public funding. So anyway, I want to jump to chapter 20, History Social Studies Framework. This is the chapter on access and equity. Just a reminder here that they give us says we are teaching to all California school children. In my opinion, that's a reference to the fact that we have LGBT kids and we're teaching to them and protecting them as well. Culturally responsive teaching. We take into consideration sexual orientation is a culture that's represented in our classroom. We want to have these characteristics of a culturally responsive teacher. We want to exude a positive disposition. Centering LGBT curriculum is not exuding a positive disposition. I've taught every grade level. I was teaching high school resource. I had a study skills class, and one of the girls, 10th grader, who identified as lesbian, she came to me, she said, hey, can I talk with the class about how I feel bad, how the society seems to have a negative view of lesbians? And they all had a 2-minute, they all have to do a 2-minute speech at the beginning of the year. I said, sure, that's fine. So she changed it, and later I said, I noticed you changed it. That's fine. It's your business. But I'm just curious why. She said, well, because that lady over there, the instructional assistant, she said she came to me and she said that I shouldn't do that, that would make people feel uncomfortable and that I would probably be harassed. That's not exuding a positive disposition toward students with diversity. That was censorship. And then I asked her, I said, well, I'm sorry to hear that. How did you feel about that? She said, well, I felt like I was discriminating against myself. Those were her words. So that's not exuding a positive disposition. Excuse me, that's just bioteam. It's bioteam. Recognize cultural and experience backgrounds, including LGBT, and have these things in your classroom. LGBT imagery, in your primary source documents, in your art, in your literature, in your songs, in your textbooks, in your supplementary materials, in your posters, in your bulletin boards, are in the books. Here's some books I had on my whiteboard tray. I had Ellen DeGeneres' biography. There's Robbie Roberts. He was a professional soccer player, came out as gay. John Amici, professional basketball player, he came out as gay. I had Asaro Tuola, probably saying his name wrong, professional football player, NFL, came out as gay. Ricky Martin, Viva Loca, came out as gay, entertainer. David Copay, professional football player in the 70s, came out as gay. And Billy Bean, professional baseball player, came out as gay. This is the other story I wanted to tell. I had my students do reports on a hero, someone from history or someone who they looked up to, who has positive character traits, and that was part of the assignment. They had to name the character traits and why they looked up to them. And I asked the principal, I explained the assignment. I said, I want to put some books on my whiteboard tray. Can I do that? She was a good principal. I liked her. Her dad was a lawyer. So she knew we have rights and we have laws. So she said, absolutely, that's your right. Well, the next year, you know what? I want to unshare. The next year, sorry, here's the books again. Billy Bean, professional baseball. David Copay, professional football. Ricky Martin, Saratola, professional football. John Amici, professional basketball. Bobby Rogers, soccer. All these people came out as gay. Ellen DeGeneres. Had them on my whiteboard tray. Students doing their hero reports. A new principal came in the next year, and vice principal, and they were not comfortable with those books. So they started harassing me. And one of the things happened is the vice principal called me and said, you know, some of your students, and this is what was really going on, this pretext really, because I had a very rowdy group of students that year. Not everyone, but some. they came in and they were wanting to rule the roost. And I'm a very authoritative, high support, high control kind of a teacher then. Now I'm retired. So they couldn't get away with a lot. I set up these rewards. I set up these, it was my idea. We had trimester dances, and the PTA would cook hot dogs, chips, and soda. And this was a reward for students for doing their work and staying out of the office. But if you ended up in the office, you didn't get the prize. So these students who were being sent to the office, they were the ones that were trying to create problems. And the administration, with the principals who weren't comfortable with me being out and out gay person, they were colluding. Is that the right word? Colluding with the students. And the students wrote just these students that were all sent to the office wrote letters saying, Mr. C makes us feel uncomfortable. He talks about his husband. He talks about gay marriage. And the administration presented me with these letters. Kim Newton was an administrator. She presented me with these letters. They were hate letters. They were hate letters. And she told me I had to do soul searching and make some changes. I'm like, I'm not making changes. These students are small-minded or whatever. So anyway, the vice principal called me because those students were complaining. She said, some of your students are complaining. They don't feel comfortable. And some of them say the books have profanity. And those books, they weren't even there for students to check out. They were just as an image. So I don't know when if they have after school program borrowed my room or something and they were looking at them. Anyway, so I said, well, Judy Blume, I read that all the time. I get it from our library. It has profanity. I want to read you to just a section. This is Blubber. This is Blubber by Judy Blume. And we all know Judy Blume likes to push the envelope. Her books have been banned a few times and been, for the most part, unbanned. But Mrs. Minish, that's Jill's protagonist's teacher, Mrs. Minish is such a bitch, I said to Wendy and Caroline as we stood by the sinks in the girls' room. She marked all my math problems wrong, and I won't read anymore. And by the way, ironically, in a way, I guess it's irony, I would never read bitch. When I would read that out loud, I would censor the profanity, and I would say, Mrs. Minich is a witch. I don't need the drama in my room. I don't need the students going, oh my goodness, he said, good teaching. That's good teaching. So anyway, that's harassment. I was being harassed, discriminated. They were telling me to censor this, which is, the Senate Bill 48's highlight positive contributions of LGBT entertainers contribute to our society, but they wouldn't censor this, and I don't think they should. Also mentioned, I said, doesn't Huck Finn or Tom Sawyer, one of those, they have the N-word, which, we certainly don't want in our schools, slang or put down. But I said, and they're not, and I don't think they should censor those books from the library, but because you have to read them in context. But anyway, they were discriminating. Discriminating is when you have one set of standards for one group. Anyway, I've been talking for 30 minutes, so I'm gonna end. I'm just gonna look at my notes really fast. Thanks for hanging in there. Those are the ELA standards. Those reports we were doing just touched on the reading standards, the writing standards, speaking and listening, the language, all those things we touched on. Anyway, I think we're going on 30 minutes, so I better stop because I had another start. But anyway, thank you so much. God bless. God bless our students in California. I hope you can, maybe during your summer break, hear one of these, listen to one or two of these, get a better understanding of LGBT in the classroom. So, I wish you well. I always like to end with a quote. The only perverse thing about homosexuality is society's insane inability to accept human nature. It's just human nature. It's like being left-handed. It's a natural variation. We'll always have left-handed people, always a constant percentage, and we'll always have LGBT people. We're not asking to be LGBT people. Nothing's wrong with it being LGBT people. My classmates, I have LGBT people in my classmates, in my workplaces, in my family. We are maybe hidden at one time for sanity's sake, for safety's sake, but we're here and we're part of the population and we deserve respect and we deserve equal protection under the law. So God bless. Thank you so much.